All right, so we are reviewing for our test then. All right. All right, let's start with this. Who thinks they can match the graph with the correct slope? You see how there's a box under each graph? Jacob, just kind of drag and drop those words at the bottom. He's incorrect. Little mistake there. Marcos. All right, the flat horizontal line is 0. Remember, slope on the graph. How do we find slope on the graph? Rise over run. So when there's no rise, that's 0 over a number. 0 over a number is 0. When there's no run, which undefined slope has, 0's on the bottom. We can't divide by 0. Okay? Any questions on those? I don't think there's anything necessarily where you have to identify what sort of slope it has, but you do have to know, especially positive or negative. All right, so we have to be able to get the whole function from a graph. So there are two parts we need. We need the slope and we need the y-intercept, right? What's the y-intercept on a graph? Well, the y-axis is up and down, so what's the y-intercept? Where it crosses the y-axis, okay? So in this case, what number is my y-intercept? 2. All right, y-intercept's where it crosses the y-axis. So that means I'm going to have y equals something plus 2. If it was a negative 2, they'd just put a minus 2, okay? All right, so now, how do we find slope? What did we say before? Rise over run. How many points do we need to find slope? 2. I got one already, the y-intercept, okay? The other point I need a point where the line is going through corners on the grid line, okay? So I could use there, 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 or there. All right, obviously, like I said, we don't have to use all of them. I would probably use the y-intercept and one like right next to it. Okay? Then you don't have to simplify. So is this a positive or negative slope? Positive. So we know we're going to have a positive number in front of the x, right? Because that's where the x goes after the slope. And then we just have to do our rise and our run. So the rise is how many? 1. Run, 3. So it's rise over run. That means my slope here would be 1/3. So I'd have y equals 1/3 x plus 2. Everybody follow? On your test, you'll have some where it'll give you an equation, and you have to say which graph matches that equation. And there will be some where it goes the other way around. They'll give you a graph, and they'll ask you for the equation. I can't make 4 graphs up on the board big enough where we can actually see them, though. All right, so y'all try that one. Corey, what you got? No. Not quite. So we have y equals something x. My y-intercept is positive, right? Zyrion, what kind of slope I got here? Yeah, so we should have a negative slope, right? So who thinks I got it? Made the wrong one negative. And all right, so Nick had it first. Slope's negative. Y-intercept is positive. Y-intercept is right there. It's where it crosses the y-axis. That's at positive 4, so we got a plus 4. We need another point, don't we? I'd use probably that point right there. As we said, that's a negative graph, right? We have a negative number in front of our x. What's our rise? 2. What's our run? 3. So that's a negative 2/3 x plus 4. Couple of y'all miscounted on your rise. You need your negative on your slope. Any questions on that? Yeah, if you did your little step thing the other way, like if you went like this, that's still the same thing. You just got to make sure it's rise and that it's negative. Any questions? All right, so another thing we'll have to be able to do, we'll have to find functions from an ordered pair or two ordered pairs. On your test, or on a check-in or an EOG, it could ask you for the whole function. It could ask you for just the y-intercept. Obviously, finding the whole function, that requires the most steps, so that's why we're doing it this way. Got it? So that is what Jaden had. Now, that is not how the answer choice would look, though. I'll get to that in a second, okay? So you'd have negative 1x plus 9. So first thing we have to do is we have to find slope. How do we find slope from ordered pairs? Change in y over change in x. Some of y'all were mixing that up on this one. Now, in this case, it doesn't really matter, but it does for some of them, you know? So for our y values, we're going from 2 to 6, x values from 7 to 3. Okay, so like I said, some of y'all had that flipped. Doesn't make a huge difference in this case because 2 to 6 is 4, 7 to 3 is 4, but it's going down, so that's negative. 4 over 4, what's negative? 4 over 4 is 1. When it's a negative, that makes it a negative. Well, it's a positive and a negative, so that's a negative 1 for our slope. Okay? Everybody good with that part? How do we find y-intercept then? Y minus mx. So I do y minus mx. So I'll just use this one here. My y value is 2 minus, my slope is negative 1, my x value is 7. If you have a calculator, just put it in just like that. You do 2 minus negative 1 times 7, it will give you the correct answer. It'll give you the 9. Without a calculator, you do 2 minus negative 1 times 7 is negative 7. When we subtract with a negative, we do same change, change. So that's where the 9 comes from. Now, as I said, this is what Jaden had when she put it together. But for your answer choice, what would be different is our slope. It would look like that instead. When there's no number in front of a variable, what number is actually there? 1. So when it's a negative 1, they'll just put a negative x. That's the same as saying 1, okay? It's like if there was no number at all, or no sign at all in front of it, it'd be a positive 1. Everybody on that? Any questions on that? All right, so similar idea. Find functions from tables. With the tables, again, it could ask you for the whole function. It could ask you for the slope. It could ask you for the y-intercept. So we got to be able to find all three parts. So how many points do we need to use on the table? 2 of them. So for this, I'm going to use that one and that one. And it works just like the ordered pairs, right? Change in y over change in x. So what are my y values? 34, 60. So from 4. And my x values, we're going from 2 to 4. 34 to 60 is 26. If needed, you can always subtract 60 minus 34. 2 to 4 is 2. 26 divided by 2, 13. Then how do we find our y-intercept? Y minus mx. So I'll use the first point just because it's smaller numbers. So we got 34 minus, my slope is 13, x value is 2. So I got 34 minus 26, that's 8. So I'd have y equals 13x plus 8. Any questions on that? So like I said, sometimes tables will ask you, and sometimes you got to do the whole thing. So that means we have to be able to do the whole thing. It just gets you either piece. The EOG and check-ins, they like questions like this. They'll give you a graph, but they'll give you a question that's asking you something different from the graph, okay? So I have a graph here. These are tiny squares, so probably hard to tell from your seats. But I'd have points there, there, and along like that. All right, so can anybody tell what the rise is on my graph? 3. And the run is just 1. So my graph here is y equals 3x. Okay? Everybody follow on that? All right, so what's the answer? A is the answer. Because, what's the question ask us for? Slope 1 less than the graph. Okay? So they like doing that. They like giving you a function or a graph and asking you about something that has something more or less. And so they kind of trick you, like, oh, I know how to find the graph. And you find the equation for the graph, and that's going to be one of the answer choices, like every time. All right, and kids get excited, like, oh, I got that answer right. But you got to read carefully. Or they could ask for just the equation on the graph, right? So everybody follow on that?